So today, we're going to dive into David McDowell's memoir, Southern Fried Denial. And let me tell you, it's a really raw, incredibly honest look at what it's like to grow up bisexual inside the independent fundamental Baptist church and the long, painful journey of facing down some serious religious trauma. The whole story really kicks off on a playground with this moment of just pure childhood innocence. It's a simple act of affection, right? A kiss on the mouth between friends, something McDowell had seen his whole life in his own family. But in the world he was about to get to know, that simple, innocent act was seen as something else entirely, something wrong. And for that kiss, he was paddled. Just imagine that for a second. You're 6 years old, you're confused, and you have absolutely no idea what you did wrong. All he was told was boys don't kiss boys. And that was his very first, very jarring lesson, that his world operated by a totally different and much, much harsher set of rules. So you have to ask, right? Why would something like that even happen? Well, to understand it, we've got to look at the very foundation of McDowell's world, a world that was built on a very specific and incredibly rigid interpretation of faith. You see, McDowell's school and his church, they were part of the Independent Fundamental Baptist Movement, or IFB. And listen, this isn't your average Baptist church. We are talking about an environment that is defined by absolute rules, a completely literal take on the Bible, and this deep-seated fear of anything and everything considered worldly. And to really get a feel for this mindset, just get this. A lot of his teachers came from schools like Bob Jones University. These were schools that, yeah, you heard that right, banned interracial dating until the year 2000. They lost their tax-exempt status because of racist policies. They even told students they couldn't go to Billy Graham crusades because Billy Graham was considered too liberal. This was the theological DNA that was shaping his entire childhood. So that foundation of fear, it doesn't just go away. It follows him right into his adolescence, a time that gets hit by two massive, life-altering events, a devastating loss and a really confusing personal discovery. When he was just 10 years old, McDowell's entire world was just shattered. His father died very suddenly after heart surgery. He remembers his mom's exact words, "It's your daddy. I'm afraid he's gone." And that grief, it would just follow him for decades, completely unaddressed and unprocessed. Now, at the exact same time he's mourning the most important man in his life, something else is happening inside him. He's starting to figure out his own identity. He knew he was attracted to girls, but he also felt this curiosity about guys, a feeling he couldn't even put a name to, not in an environment where it was basically forbidden to even exist. So this internal war sets him off on this desperate path. As a young adult, he genuinely believed he was broken, and so he starts this mission to fix himself, all according to the rules he'd been taught his whole life. His plan was pretty much a three-step process, and it was born from this deep, deep denial. First, join the army. He hoped that discipline would somehow straighten him up. Second, attend an ex-gay ministry, what we now know as conversion therapy, to be healed. And finally, marry a woman, to prove to everyone and to himself that he could live the faithful life he was supposed to. But this cure, it was poison. That ex-gay ministry didn't change who he was. All it did was rip open that unhealed wound from his father's death and just pile on new layers of shame. It caused so much psychological damage and offered absolutely no real help at all. So for years, McDowell just tried to force it, right? To make this life work. But the pressure of denying who you really are, while trying to hold down decades of trauma, well, it just keeps building until you hit an inevitable and pretty catastrophic breaking point. The whole cornerstone of his plan to be fixed, his first marriage, it was just crumbling. And in this incredibly desperate email to his wife, he laid all his pain bare, thinking, it can't possibly get any worse than this. Her response was just shattering. She admits she doesn't love him. She says she actually hoped getting caught cheating would force the end of their marriage. The entire life he had tried so hard to build was just a facade, and it had just been completely demolished. And what followed was just a total, complete collapse. I mean, look at this timeline. In 2014, his mother dies. A year after that, he finally comes out as bisexual, which leads to the end of his second marriage. By 2017, the strain is so much that he has a mental health crisis and ends up hospitalized. And by 2018, he's lost his car, his home, he's homeless. You'd think, okay, that's it. That has to be rock bottom. It can't possibly get any worse. But there was one more devastating blow still to come. An email shows up in his inbox with this just unthinkable subject line. His close friend Adam, a gay reverend who had walked his own tough path with religion, had died. Suddenly, unexpectedly. And this final loss, it just plunged McDowell into the deepest depression of his life. And yet somehow it was from this absolute low point that a completely different kind of journey began. And this time, it wasn't about being fixed. It was about real, genuine healing and rebuilding a life and a faith completely on his own terms. You can see this huge shift in one really powerful moment. After he found an affirming Episcopal church, he just broke down crying during a service. Now, in his old church, he would have been swarmed by prayer warriors all trying to fix him. But here, a woman just quietly came over and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. That was it. A quiet act of presence, not judgment. A world of difference. You know, what McDowell experienced, it actually has a name: religious trauma. It's the psychological harm that comes from these negative religious experiences and high-control spiritual environments, the very world that had defined his life since he was 6 years old. It can show up as anxiety, depression, a deep-seated fear of damnation, all the things McDowell had been battling for decades. His healing? Well, it involved completely redefining what faith even meant to him. He moved away from orthodoxy, which is all about having the correct set of beliefs, to something called orthopraxy, which is all about correct actions. For him, faith became less about having all the right answers and more about just showing up and showing love. McDowell's memoir is incredible, but it doesn't just tell his personal story. It really forces all of us to ask a much larger question. When the very source of your spiritual identity is also the source of your deepest trauma, what does the path to healing truly look like?